Fact. Sugary cereals taste way better when there are toys in there. Also fact. Big Cereal has been taken over by pencil-necked lawyers who are way too worried about possible plastic ingestion lawsuits to do the right thing and put the toys back in the cereal boxes. But not all the cereal companies have bent the knee to those fears. No, there is one owned by Dick and Linda Applejack, founders of Apple Jacks, who are not sponsoring this video and did not reply to any of my numerous emails requesting that they do so, who still put toys in their cereal. If you buy Apple Jacks right now, you can get a free SpongeBob Bowl Buddy. What is that? I do not know. Do I want that? No. I just want the Pavlovian satisfaction of pouring out a bowl of cereal again like when I was a kid and hearing a clink. I really do miss free toy inside. I think this is one of the reasons that I fell in love with the whole mystery box idea, right? It's a box where you got stuff in it. It's pretty awesome but predictable, and you know that's coming, but then you know that also lurking deep down in there somewhere is a really interesting surprise. Likewise, when we talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, this collection of ancient artifacts that were discovered in the 1940s in a bunch of caves near the Dead Sea, near a settlement called Qumran, about 25 miles south and east of Jerusalem. These scrolls date back 2,000 years. People are like, oh yeah, I know what's in there. It's the Bible. It's the predictable stuff, right? The stuff that we know was coming. But much like the box of Apple Jacks with the free toy inside, the Dead Sea Scrolls also hold surprises. There's a whole bunch of other interesting stuff in there. And what we're going to do this time around is that we're going to pretend that this box of cereal is the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then the Dead Sea Scrolls have a bunch of secret prizes in it. And we're going to find out exactly what they are and read through a few of those samples because it's hyper interesting. Also, free toy inside. I'm Matt. This is a 10-minute Bible Hour. What's in the Dead Sea Scrolls? Here we go. Like I was saying a second ago, if you pop open a box of Apple Jacks, even one that says there's a free toy inside, still the biggest chunk of thing you're going to find in here is Apple Jacks themselves. Likewise, you pop open the Dead Sea Scrolls, the biggest chunk of stuff is just going to be Bible. But when I say Bible, I don't mean New Testament, even though chronologically this overlaps with the New Testament a little bit. The people who wrote this stuff down, it's not where their head was. They weren't Christians. They were part of an ancient Jewish sect that got referenced by a few different historians that lived back in the day. And their thing was that apparently they were into the exact same Old Testament, the exact same Hebrew scriptures that we still have around today. Every book of the Protestant Old Testament or the Jewish Old Testament is accounted for except for the Book of Esther. Now, you hear some people say that Nehemiah is not in there, but these people would have had Nehemiah and Ezra lumped together on the same scroll, and we've had chunks of Ezra since early in the Discovery game with the Dead Sea Scrolls. So everything's there except for Esther, which also isn't troubling because Esther would have been stored separately so that it could have been read at the Feast of Purim every year. They did it back then. They still do it today. And Esther, of course, describes the events that are commemorated at the festival of Purim every year. And nobody would have left that in a cave. That was valuable. They would have wanted to take it with them so that they could properly celebrate this holiday. All of that is to say, not only is there a whole bunch of Old Testament in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but everything that should be there is there, minus one book for which there's a perfectly good explanation. And further, it all looks a whole lot like the Bible that we were operating off of in the 1940s in terms of our oldest manuscripts of the Old Testament. And what's crazy about that is that our oldest manuscripts dated to like 1100 AD, and this bounces all the way back to at the earliest 250 BC. That's a crazy amount of time, and to have the scriptures line up as well as they do is kind of mind-boggling, and we'll unpack that more in the next episode. So you got a whole bunch of Bible in there, but that makes sense because it's right there on the label. Let's see what else we got hiding out in the cereal. The next thing we find in here, there we go, is the Bowl Buddy. Oh, he clips on the side of your bowl. But that's promised, and it makes sense because it would go alongside the Apple Jacks. It's on brand. And likewise, the most obvious prize that you're going to find hidden in the box of the Dead Sea Scrolls are Bible commentaries. If you have a whole bunch of Bible, probably people are also going to write stuff about this very important document. And they do. And right now, I would like to read you a little bit of Bible commentary. Here we go. This is a commentary on the book of Isaiah, written again by the people of Qumran, the Essenes. They were Jewish people. And this is their read on what would have been a very ancient book of the Bible by the time they were writing this. Its interpretation concerns the Kittim. Kittim was a reference to any outsider or subduer. In this case, they would have probably been talking about the Romans, who shall crush the house of Israel and the humble. All the nations and valiant shall be dismayed at and their hearts shall melt. And that which he said, the tallest trees shall be cut down, that's what Isaiah said in the text. These are the valiant of the Kittim, the outsiders, the subduers, the Romans. So what we can see is that the commentary on Isaiah that we find in Cave 4 of the Qumran Caves is one that interpreted Isaiah through the lenses of the current political crisis, that is, the Romans beating down the doors of their countrymen. Here's another Dead Sea Scrolls Bible commentary on Habakkuk. Here's the verse they're interpreting. Woe to him who causes his neighbor to drink, who pours out his venom to make them drunk, that he may gaze on their feasts. And now here is their commentary, their interpretation. This concerns the wicked priest who pursued the teacher of righteousness to the house of his exile, that he might confuse him with his venomous fury. Oh, interesting. So that means they are looking at the book of Habakkuk, written centuries earlier, and saying he was predicting things about Qumran. This wicked priest comes up throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls as this character who is always putting pressure on the teacher of righteousness, who's the good guy and apparently the founder of Qumran. And so we get a little bit of insight here that they are reading all of the Old Testament and Hebrew history through the lenses of their one unique little group. That tells us a lot about them. And there's another really interesting commentary in here on the book of Genesis that they also found in Cave 4, but I'm not going to read it to you because it gets a little long. But more or less, they're trying to take the story of Noah, the early stuff from the book of Genesis, and cram it into some sort of metaphor for the calendar system that they had developed. More on the calendar stuff here in just a minute. But this commentary thing is something that they did back in the day. It's something that we've done throughout history. If people think the Bible is really important, they tend to write stuff about what they think of it, like Martin Luther did on Romans, and like this one here that I really like that Darrell Bach much more recently did on the book of Acts. So you got Bible, you got commentary. Let's find out what else is in here. All right. What? This is a total surprise. It's Eusebius's History of the Church, a great book from Christian history that's really interesting and insightful, but that most people don't look at and say would count as Bible, even though they'd say it's very, very important. Likewise, when we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are right around here somewhere, there are 3 books from what Protestants call the Apocrypha and what Catholics and Orthodox call the Deuterocanon, or the secondary or second canon. These are books that have been disputed throughout history, that are not included in the Jewish canon of Scripture, but that are interesting. They are about God and things that theoretically religious people and Christians and Jews would be into. So the books that are represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls include Tobit, which manifests 4 different times, never completely. You get, I don't know, I'm just ballparking here, maybe 15% of the total book of Tobit if you combine together those 4 things. But it's very well attested that the people at Qumran viewed Tobit as at least being important, whether they thought of it as Bible or not, who can say. Additionally, there are fragments of the Book of Wisdom, Sirach, in here as well, and a purported letter of Jeremiah that appears, I believe, in Catholic Bibles, but does not appear, of course, in Protestant Bibles. Now, again, this is one of those places where I know that there are some of you watching, and you're like, hey, I'm a Catholic. That is not what I already think. And hey, it's a completely different conversation to debate and process through what books belong in the Old Testament and which ones don't. But the reality is that the Apocrypha, or the Deuterocanon, are not well represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And where they do appear in these 3 particular books, the references are relatively slim. This is a surprisingly spacious box. No way! It's the Heir to the Empire. It's by Timothy Zahn. This is the first of the Thrawn trilogy. It's one of the most beloved Star Wars Expanded Universe books of all time. But unfortunately, it is not canon. That doesn't mean the book's not great. People love this stuff because it takes characters that they're super familiar with anyway and puts them in difficult situations, and we get to see the themes and feel of Star Wars play out all over the Star Wars universe, even though no one would count it as canon ever. Likewise, when we come to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we get a whole collection of different books that nobody has ever thought of as being Bible in an official capacity, but it's really interesting, and it involves characters from the Bible and circumstances from the Bible and the God of the Bible. So let me find you a sample of that here. This is an excerpt from a larger work called the Book of Enoch, but this part in particular is from a part called the Book of Giants, which sounds interesting, so let's read it. Not all the words are here, but we get close. A signature was signed, and the Great One reigns over all living flesh and over all those who rule. Here is the end of the dream, and behold, all the giants were terrified and called Mahawai, and he came to the congregation of the Nephilim, and the giants sent him to Enoch and said to him, "Go to him. Previously, you listened to his voice and say to him that he should explain to you your interpretation of the dreams, and that all should rest with those who hunger strongly after it." What does that mean and where does it fit? I don't know. That's just all we get right there. A lot of this is chopped up into little bits, but it's at least intelligible, and we have some other sources that allow us to fill in the gaps on this and see this as a cohesive story. So another thing that we get out of our surprise box here is non-canonical extra-biblical literature that was very popular at the time and even still today. What a haul. Feels like Christmas. Got it. It's a bar of Dove soap. That's fantastic. I'll use that later to shower. You know, this reminds me of some stuff in the Dead Sea Scrolls called the Community Rule that are about ritual purification practices and other general hygiene and interrelational practices at the Qumran community. Some of these things are things that you would just expect from the ancient world, like don't be a gross, disgusting pig and make sure that you poop and pee out at the edge of the city and not like right in the middle of town because we'll all get sick and die. But some of these things get to be pretty quirky because they obviously had had a few troubles along the way with people misbehaving in public settings, misbehaving at their ceremonial meal. And so the longer this community existed, the more they had to write very oddly specific rules. And rather than reading you the boring ones, I'm going to read you those rather oddly specific rules. Okay, actually, this one's pretty tame, but I'll read it to you anyway. It says, "And on completing his 7 days of purification, he shall wash his clothes with water and cleanse his body, and he shall put on his garments and shall bless again the God of Israel." It's a lot of stuff like that, but I want to find the goofier stuff. Yeah, okay, found it. This is the stuff that is more obviously born out of a few people's bad behavior, like Kyle and Larry did some stupid stuff, and then they had to write rules to accommodate it. It goes like this. "Whoever has gone naked before his companions without having been obliged to do so, he shall do penance for 6 months." The text does not go on to disclose what being obliged to do so would entail. But it goes on, "Whoever is spat in the assembly of the congregation shall do penance for 30 days. Whoever has been so poorly dressed that when drawing his hand from beneath his garment his nakedness has been seen, he shall do penance for 30 days. Whoever has guffawed foolishly shall do penance for 30 days. Whoever has drawn out his left hand to gesticulate with it shall do penance for 10 days. So you get a little less punishment for gesticulation, but you're still not supposed to be messing around with the nakedness and the gesticulating. It's interesting to come across this stuff as a little prize in our Dead Sea Scrolls box, because there's some stuff you would expect. Like, well, you got to have a community. I mean, what are the values and goals of your community? There's language in there about what it takes to get into the community and stay in the community. But then there's also very practical stuff about just problems that people had interpersonally, which I think is super interesting because it very much humanizes something, a group of people, that is, that we might be tempted to think of in entirely spiritual ideological terms. So in addition to very obviously the Bible, in addition to Bible commentaries, in addition to the Apocrypha or the Deuterocanon, in addition to fan fiction or just really fun literature that people liked at the time that had to do with vaguely Bible-y things, in addition to the community rules about cleansing and participation in the life of the community, we have also got a grenade! That's right, because there are scrolls that are all about war and fighting and killing people and how that's going to work out. And all of them have this vaguely prophetic tone to them, but also this very specific militaristic set of details to them about who stands where and who points spears at what. And all of it is very much religion and military mushed together, with priests even leading the way into battle. And when they're smitten before them, the priests shall sound the trumpets of summons, and all the foot soldiers, shall rally to them from the midst of the front formations, and the 6 divisions together with the fighting division, they shall take up their stations. Altogether they shall be 7 formations, 28,000 fighting men, and 6,000 horsemen. All these shall pursue the enemy to destroy him in an everlasting destruction in the battle of God. The priests shall sound for them the trumpets of pursuit, and they shall deploy against all the enemy in a pursuit to destruction, and the horsemen shall thrust them back on the flanks of the battle until they are utterly destroyed. As you can see, prophecy and military history and the idea of the ultimate vindication of the beliefs and understanding of the text of this community are all wrapped up into these war scrolls. Back to the box. So many prizes. Best box of cereal ever. Wow. How did I not notice this initially? Why, it's a Star Wars Cats calendar. And it reminds me a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls that have a whole bunch of scrolls that are all about calendars. Apparently, the people at Qumran were really interested in winning some kind of fight about what day of the week it was and how calendars ought to be viewed, which is a more interesting debate than you would figure, because there is some competition developing between a Roman calendar structure, the lunar calendar that had been popular in the ancient Near East, the idea of a lunar solar calendar, which got some traction later on, and I don't think anybody quite had in view the medieval calendrical reforms that make the calendars that you and I are used to today, but these guys were kind of close. They were arguing for what, to me at least, looks like a 364-day calendar that involved some manipulation on a 4-year cycle of days and festivals to keep it from drifting as the years went along. And these calendrical texts are dry and difficult. And the new moon is on the second day of the week, Petahaya, which is on the 23rd day in the 6th month. And on the first day in the week of Jakin, which is on the 5th day in the 7th. I think you get the idea. Next up. Wowzy, wow, the kids are going to love this. It's a book on astrology. What could be more fun than this? And weirdly, as much as we do not associate that with Christianity or Judaism, there are horoscopes in some kind of capacity and context that exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Looks like this is another Cave 4 find, and this isn't going to make any sense, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. His eyes are black and glowing. His beard is something, and it is something. His voice is gentle, and I say something, it just means that part of the text was destroyed. His teeth are fine and well aligned. He is neither tall nor short, and he something, and his fingers are thin and long, and his thighs are smooth. And the soles of his feet something, and his toes are well aligned. His spirit consists of 8 parts in the house of light, the second column, and 1 in the house of darkness. And this is his birthday on which he is to be or was born, and his animal is something. It feels like there's some kind of weird culty, cultic, horoscopy stuff going on. But apparently the people who study these kind of things, and that includes this man, Geza Vermes, who I guess has been a part of this project since like the very, very beginning and has been updating this running translation all the way up till this edition, which dates to the mid-2010s, a few years back. People like this are able to look at outside documents from beyond the Dead Sea Scrolls, compare the format, the formatting, the language, and figure out, oh, yeah, we have this more complete version of this thing over here. That is what a horoscope looked like in the ancient world, and that's how they're able to know what's going on, even though I don't get it. Still, hey, more surprises in our box of cereal. Let's see what else is in there.
Guys, I sure hope the next thing is a plush keyboard. What? It's a plush keyboard! This is the best day of my life!
And totally coincidentally, this plush keyboard reminds me a lot of the hymns and other music parts that exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like this one, that demonstrates a shockingly Bible-like understanding of the infinite nature of God. This is called hymn number 6. It goes like this: Thou art long-suffering in thy judgments, and righteous in all thy deeds. We don't know how they sang this, but you can just picture it with music. By thy wisdom all things exist from eternity, and before creating them thou knewest their works forever and ever. Nothing is done without thee, and nothing is known unless thou desirest it. Thou hast created all the spirits, and hast established a statute and law for all their works. And it goes on and on, talking about the glory and authority and infinite nature of God in a way that I'm sure a good theologian could find points of nitpick and nuance, but a whole lot of it really sounds pretty psalmy and pretty Bible-y. Here's another one. This one is maybe not a song, maybe this counts as a prayer, but I thought it was pretty compelling as well. And it goes like this: We pray thee, O Lord, do in accordance with thyself, in accordance with the greatness of thy might, thou who didst pardon our fathers when they rebelled against you, saying... And then it goes on to flesh that out, but it's a little bit broken up there. How about that language? Did you catch that at the beginning? It was the Lord's Prayer in just a little different way of phrasing it. Thy will be done, your kingdom come, because of your great might and all of that. I mean, this is a complete bending of the knee to the authority of God. And that sounds a lot like what Jesus was telling people to do in response to who he claimed to be and the kingdom that he claimed to be a king over. I am not saying that stuff like this indicates that the Essenes were like proto-Christians or something, but there may be some very small connection between even the teachings of John the Baptist, which would have happened geographically in the exact same neck of the woods as this stuff was going on, and themes that were developed for an audience that might have been familiar with this kind of language, that maybe Jesus was trying to draw on connections or frame it in a way that they would understand. I don't know. It's all speculative. Next prize in the Dead Sea Scrolls cereal box. Oh, look at that. It's a porcelain Hedwig the Owl mug. This is a great day because owls are something that remind you of wisdom. And the very next thing I was going to talk about in the Dead Sea Scrolls was all of this wisdom literature that is included in there, including this one. Blessed is something with a pure heart and does not slander with his tongue. Blessed are those who hold her, wisdom's, precepts and do not hold to the ways of iniquity. Blessed are those who rejoice in her and who do not burst forth in ways of folly. Blessed are those who seek her with pure hands and do not pursue her with a treacherous heart. Blessed is the man who's attained wisdom and walks in the law of the Most High. There is stuff that sounds like Old Testament Torah kind of material. There is stuff in there that sounds like Proverbs, the personification of wisdom that happens early in the book of Proverbs. And just the structure and the format gives us a clue that the thing that Jesus did with the Beatitudes was not entirely a novelty. That the Beatitudes of Matthew chapter 5, all those statements about blessed are the so-and-so for they will such and such, that must have been a structure that he was drawing on that people already knew something about, and maybe Jesus was kind of riffing on it, meaning that there would be an even deeper and additional level of meaning that original audience might have picked up on real quick. I think it's more than clear enough for us when we get to Matthew chapter 5, but it was really stunning when the people who started to originally translate this came across it and were like, what? Beatitudes were already a thing when Jesus did that? Interesting. And it's a Loot Crate treasure chest, which totally reminds me of going on a treasure hunt, which totally is a thing that happens in the Dead Sea Scrolls. My friends, maybe the most childlike wonder, Indiana Jones fun part of the Dead Sea Scrolls is what we're about to talk about right now. It is the part that is written on a very unique media. This is on copper, and there's only one, and this copper scroll is one that has baffled people for ages and ages because it reads entirely like a treasure hunt. It's literally just 64 locations, vaguely described, and then a description of what treasure is sitting right in there. And so you pick this up, and you literally are getting stuff like this. In the cistern of the esplanade, which is under the stairs, 42 talents, which is an unbelievably large amount of money. In the tomb of so-and-so, the third, 100 gold bars. Item number 59, 60 talents at its entrance from the west under the black stone. 61, this is a description of something that was a long ways away from where this scroll was found. On Mount Gerizim, under the stairs of the Heir underground cavity, a box and its contents, and 60 talents of silver. 64 things, just like that. Of course, people have gone and looked. I know you are automatically asking it, and nobody's found anything, ever. Theories abound as to what this copper scroll is leading people toward and why it was written down. Some people have assumed that this was the amassed wealth of the people of Qumran. That doesn't make any sense. Where would this tiny community have got crazy amounts of riches like that? Other people think that the very event that probably drove the Qumran people into hiding and caused them to stash all of these documents we're talking about is the event that this money was in reference to, the Bar Kokhba revolt of the 130s AD. Very close by the Qumran caves, we literally found a letter written from the leader of the revolt, Bar Kokhba himself, to somebody else, maybe a lieutenant, I don't know, giving instructions to somebody about what to do in this circumstance or that circumstance. And so I think it's a really good theory that they had accumulated all this wealth and that they wanted to hide it from the Kittim, the Romans, the invaders, the subduers. And so they came up with this cryptic list, and we found the cipher, but we can't find any of the stuff that was actually hidden. This is a real life treasure hunt, and it is crazy interesting and just goes to further illustrate that the Dead Sea Scrolls are awesome because of how much Bible is in there. But when you actually start going through the things and poking around at all of these difficult to understand, complex, otherworldly scrolls, you discover that they were thinking about a lot of things, kind of a lot like you and I think about a lot of things. And they had different genres of literature, kind of like you and I have different genres of literature. And they worried about how to conduct a community and just how to handle your business and not be gross, kind of like theoretically you and I worry about that. They respected people who could put deep thought into something and think wise thoughts. They thought deeply about the Bible, but they also wrote deeply about the Bible. All of this rounds out a picture of this community just enough to make me all the more interested in knowing what else might still be hiding in those hills. But much like the promise of a box of Apple Jacks with a free toy inside, there's a ton of Apple Jacks, a whole lot of Bible. But all of the free toys inside are absolutely fascinating, and I hope this little taste of it makes you interested to go and dig around on the interwebs and read through more of this for yourself. All right, that's what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Let's do this again soon.